Is it audible now? Now it's audible. Please tell me. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. Great. So before we start our session, here is a very quick reminder that our PTS, Prelims Test Series, is going on for the prelims exam. So I hope all of you are attending it. If you're not, please do it. If you haven't attended the previous sessions, please take a look at those before you attempt your prelims exam. So here are the various topics that we'll be covering in this session. First, we have women empowerment through PRIs. This is a topic taken directly from the Kurukshetra magazine. Then we have private military companies. What are these companies and what are the various consequences they can have? Then we have a topic from Yojana, which is women entrepreneurship in MSME sector. Then we have the POSH Act, Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act. This is a news because of the ongoing wrestlers' agitation against sexual harassment in the Wrestling Federation of India. Then finally, we have the topic on malaria. What are the causes of malaria and what are the latest developments? Apart from that, what is the timeline of the development of malaria policy in India? Okay. So we'll be starting with our first topic, that is women empowerment through PRIs. Just a second. Okay. So we'll take a look at the practice question. Article 243D, which is related to reservation for women in the Panchayati Raj institutions. It calls for 1/3 reservation. Article 243D of the Indian Constitution was a milestone for women empowerment. Comment on its evolution. Also suggest some ways for strengthening the women PRI representatives of India. So what is the background of this particular topic? Why was this article chosen to be written in the Kurukshetra magazine? Is that the 73rd Amendment Act of India, because of that, 14.5 lakh women are currently members of the 3-tier Panchayati Raj institutions all across the country. Currently, 33% reservation is mandatory for women representatives in the panchayats. However, 22 states and union territories of the country, they have already gone one step ahead. They have now provided 50% reservation. 83% of the women representatives, according to a study by Ministry of Panchayati Raj. The study was called Study on Elected Women Representatives in Panchayati Raj Institutions. PRI is Panchayati Raj Institutions. So according to this study, it was found out that 83% of the women representatives, they could enter the political scene of the country in the Panchayati Raj institutions only because of this kind of reservation. So that shows what was the important role that 243 played in political representation of women. So what was the status before this amendment? What were the various recommendations that were provided by various committees on Panchayati Raj? So before 73rd Amendment Act, there was no as such policy of reservation for women. In fact, you know that there was no proper policy in place for local self-governments as well. First time, the Balwant Rai Mehta Committee report on Panchayati Raj in 1957, it recommended that we need to nominate 2 women members to the Panchayati Raj institutions. Now, these women members will be those who have interest in women and child development. Okay. After this, in 1974, there was again a committee known as Committee on the Status of Women in India. This committee said that there should be statutory, that is created by a law of the parliament. There should be statutory women panchayats in the country, and these women panchayats, they should be given certain amount of autonomy and certain roles and functions so that they can work in the field of women empowerment. However, please note that both these recommendations, they could have put women in particular silos. It could have created differences between women and men in the country. Okay. Then came the Ashok Mehta Committee report in the year 1987. Now, this report, it said that two women representatives, two women candidates who have got the highest number of votes during the Panchayati Raj elections, they should automatically be given the membership of these institutions. Whether or not they won the election, but they got the highest number of votes amongst the various women candidates. However, it also said that in case there was no woman candidate, then two women candidates, they can be nominated into the Panchayati Raj institutions. Okay. So again, the number would have been two only, right? Then came the National Perspective Plan for Women. This came in the year 1988. According to this plan, it called for 30% reservation for women members, for women representatives at the president level, president of the panchayats, and at the panchayat level as well. Apart from that, this plan, it also said that there should also be a certain amount of reservation for the chief executives of the Panchayati Raj institutions. Now, you know that chief executives, they are usually people in the administrative services, be it at the Indian Administrative Service or the State Administrative Service. Okay. So that is what the National Perspective Plan for Women, it asked for. Then eventually we had the 73rd Amendment Act, which through the Article 243D gave a constitutional status for reservation of 33.3% to women representatives in the Panchayati Raj institutions. However, the same study which I talked about previously, the study by Ministry of Panchayati Raj. Now, please remember this study. We'll be taking a look at many of the provisions, many of the findings of this study in the upcoming slides. So this study, it again pointed out that even though representation of women has increased in Panchayati Raj institutions, so much so that right now 46% of all the Panchayati Raj institution representatives, they are now women. But it has been seen that in general, at a community level, women participation in any village developmental activities is low. It is less than 25%. So what, according to this report, were the determinants of good performance of Panchayati Raj Institute representatives? Now, this report said that as the duration of being elected representative increases, the performance of that person also improves. Take an example, a normal example. You are doing some type of coding or any kind of job. As the time you spend in that particular job increases, your experience will increase. And as your experience increases, your performance, it will also improve. Same goes for the PRI representatives. Longer the duration of being elected representatives, better will be the performance. Second observation was that when the education of that particular representative is up to middle school and above levels, that is 8th class or above, the performance of that person, it also improves. Now, when it comes to women representatives, when this study was conducted, only 48% of the women representatives, they had an education level of middle school or above. The third thing was active involvement in panchayat work. More they involve themselves in this work, more will they learn, more their experience will improve, and finally their performance will improve as well. And finally is training activities, training and capacity building. It is a very important part of any kind of job, right? Even in your job, if you are working, or in any other job, if you get training and capacity building opportunities, you learn new and new things and your performance will improve. Same goes for this. However, it was also seen in this study that around 43% of the women representatives, they did not get any kind of training activities. Of this 43%, when it was asked what was the reason that you didn't get the training, 61% said that they did not know, no training was organized, and 22% said that the training definitely was organized, however they were not called for the training. So women representatives, even when the training was organized, 22% said that they were not even called for the training. Okay, so that's why they missed it. Now, what is the impact of participation of women representatives? The same study of the Ministry of Panchayati Raj, the study's name I'll repeat once again. It was study on elected women representatives in Panchayati Raj institutes. Okay. So according to the same study, when the women representatives, they were asked whether it has benefited them, whether this reservation and their representation in the political scenario, whether it has benefited them or not, this is the result. There was an extreme increase in their self-esteem, in their confidence level, in their abilities to make decisions. They had an improved respect in the community and as well as their family. So when we talk about empowerment, what is empowerment? The ability to make choices for yourself. That exactly is what is empowerment. Now, when you have increased confidence, when you get respect from the people around you, your confidence further increases, your self-esteem increases, and you are more boldly able to make choices for yourself, and you get more and more empowered. So this was the result. So many, more than 50% in all the cases, in fact more than 67% in all the cases, women have said that they have felt improvement in themselves. Apart from that, 72% of the women, they said that they are actively involved in providing civic amenities in the place where they are representing. 62% they agreed that they had made efforts to enhance education by focusing on increasing enrollment ratios in the places they are representing. They also made efforts to reduce domestic violence. Now, in most of the cases, majority of the cases, women are at the receiving end of domestic violence. So when there was increase in women representatives, there was an increase in sensitivity towards the problems that women were facing. Now, there was another study done by Ministry of Panchayati Raj. So this study was done on the 20th anniversary of the 73rd Amendment Act. Okay. So in this study, various research papers were analyzed, and these research papers, they are as you see over here. First was by Chattopadhyay and Duflo in 2001. Now this research, it studied 105 women-led Gram Panchayats. GP is Gram Panchayat in the state of West Bengal. Now, according to this study, it was found that more investment was done in infrastructure related for women in the Gram Panchayats that were led by women. What is the infrastructure relevant for women? Roads, fuel, water. Compare that to Gram Panchayats led by women, led by men. There, the bigger focus was on education. Here, the bigger focus was on roads, fuel, and water, because usually women have the onus of getting fuel and water for their households. Then there was a study by Duflo and Topalova in the year 2004. It found out that in the Gram Panchayats led by women, there were less chances of bribing. It was also found in this study that generally in the places where the Gram Panchayats are led by women, the villagers, they are less satisfied by the basic public amenities. However, it was also found that this dissatisfaction, it is rooted in patriarchy, and it does not have anything to do with the working of these women representatives. Then there was a study by Bardhan and team in 2005. It found that in those Gram Panchayats led by women, there was an improvement in subsidized loans being given to the marginalized communities, the marginalized sections of the society, like the SCs, the STs, women, disabled, and so on. Bribing is giving money to get some work done. Okay, so that is bribing. I hope Sarita, Rajesh, and Snehal, your comment is rectified. Then there was a study by Besley, Pandey, and Rao again in 2005, and it said that the Panchayati Raj institutes that were led by women, they were no worse or no better than the ones led by men. So they were no worse or no better. They were same. Whether it is a woman-led, whether it is a man-led, their functioning was same. There was no difference in the efficiency of working of the Gram Panchayats. So there was no argument against leadership of women in any region. Apart from that, this study also said that political experience, as it increases, it enhances the performance of women more frequently than that of men. So that means that more the opportunity is given to women, more will they learn, more will they improve their performance compared to the men. There was also another finding that women representatives, they performed better in those villages which were less dominated by upper castes and in states which have more mature PRI system, where the panchayats, they are older, where the panchayat system was present even before the 73rd Amendment Act, it came into being. Okay, so these were the findings of this particular study. The general conclusion of all these findings was that what this study finally gave was that there was an increase, there was a need to increase social, economic, and institutional support to women in order to improve their performance as women representatives. Okay. Then what were the recommendations given by this particular study? These recommendations, they were given under the Panchayati Raj 2011-17 and All India perspective. Okay. First was that the PRI budgets they should have a separate dedicated component for women. You know something about gender budgeting. A particular amount of the budget, it is reserved for any issues that might be faced by women. Okay, so this money is spent on women related issues. The linkages with SHGs, self-help groups, should be done at all levels of the Panchayati Raj institutes. Now, many of the SHGs, self-help groups, they are led by women. If there are proper linkages between the SHGs and the Panchayati Raj institutes, then they will get a better idea of what the problems the women are facing. MOPR is Ministry of Panchayati Raj. Then training and capacity building should be a continuous process for elected women representatives. In fact, it should be done for all kinds of all types of representatives, not just women. So there should be continuous training and capacity building in fields like administration, budgeting, proper implementation of the schemes, and so on. Okay. Apart from that, there should be peer-to-peer and horizontal learning component as well. There is something called vertical learning. What happens in vertical learning? Someone has come and they are just giving you information. What we are doing right now, I am providing you information. Okay. In horizontal learning, what will happen? Like a group discussion. All of you will sit together and you will pass information amongst each other. So that is horizontal learning. So peer-to-peer and horizontal learning should be increased as a part of their capacity building programs. There should be sharing of best practices and success stories. SHGs are self-help groups. Apart from that, the political parties, because they are giving the tickets to the women, right? So political parties, they should be encouraged to give more and more tickets to women representatives. They should be given an opportunity to complete their 5-year term as a Panchayati Raj Institute representative. There should be Mahila Sabhas. In these Sabhas, women representatives and the members, the female members of the community, they should come together and they can discuss their problems, and the representatives will then be aware of what all problems are faced by the women and they can help solve them. Also, the quorum, the minimum number for women representatives in Gram and Ward Sabha should be ensured, that there should be this many number of women present before any discussion, before any meeting can start. Then what are the recommendations for more effective involvement of women representatives? We know that improved educational status will improve the performance. So there is a need to improve educational levels of the representatives. Young women, they should be encouraged to join politics so that from very young age, they are aware of the things going on around them. And as they grow, their experience increases and they can be bigger part. They can play a bigger part in the upliftment of women all across the country. Regular training and capacity building, including leadership training, it should be provided. We have already discussed this point. Proper honoraria, proper salaries, adequate salaries must be provided to women, because this can also, apart from the other things, this can also act as a motivating factor for the women representatives to work better. There is a need to increase the visibility of women in general in the rural areas. How can it be done? By increasingly identifying the good work they are doing, increasing their presence in the various committees that are established in the village areas, right? Apart from that, there is a need to mobilize women into their own collectives. They can become an advocacy group. of their own. Okay. For example, the Kudum Shri in Kerala has played a very good role in mobilizing the women for speaking up for themselves. There is, generally speaking, there is a need to devolve powers and authorities to the panchayats, and there is a need to reserve certain seats for women in the civil services. So these are the other recommendations that were given in that particular article of Kurukshetra. Just a second. So now we come to the question. Article 243D of the Indian Constitution was a milestone for women empowerment. Comment on its evolution. Also suggests some ways for strengthening women PRI representatives of India. All these things, they have been covered in our previous slides. In the introduction, you can just talk about the 73rd Amendment Act and the Article 243. You can also mention that according to a study by Ministry of Panchayati Raj, 83% of the women, they got a chance to become women representatives of PRI only because of this particular article. In the body part, you can mention what was the evolution of women representation in PRIs. Earlier, there was no reservation as such. Then came Balwant Rai Committee and so on. Okay, all that has been discussed. Then you can mention that how this representation has improved the self-esteem and the confidence level amongst the women. Finally, you can suggest other recommendations that can help in improving the performance of these women representatives of the Panchayati Raj institutes. In the conclusion, you can mention that women representation in local governments has not only helped in their political empowerment, but also ensured social upliftment of women by ensuring that they are represented at the grassroots levels of Indian democracy. Okay, so with that, you will end your answer, and that is it. Now we move to the, okay, so this question, I'll tell you, it was 15 marker and 250 words. Okay. The next topic is on private military companies. Now, why were these in news? Why were private military companies in news? Before that, let us take a look at question. The question is for 10 marks and 150 words. What are private military companies? What challenges do they pose with regards to global peace and security? Now, why are they in news? It is because currently there is a battle going on in Sudan. There is a war going on in Ukraine. Now, this battle in Sudan and the war in Ukraine, it has raised questions over role of mercenaries or private military companies in various kinds of conflicts. So, what are these private military companies? Now, these are certain companies which can provide a variety of services to the country where they are deployed. Please note what kind of services can they provide. Okay. First is security. They can provide security to public or private infrastructure. They can provide extra support, a tactical support to the country's military. Okay, they can support the military from outside through their various functions. They can involve themselves in capacity building. Now, as you know that increasing private sector in any sector, it can lead to increased innovation, right? So what happens is that there can be certain skill sets, there can be certain expertise that has been perfected by these private military companies. Now these private military companies, they can help the military of that country through various capacity building and training programs. So they can train them in these new technologies, in these new specialized fields of working. They can also provide certain advisory functions. They can advise the senior leaders with regards to security of the particular country. They can also perform certain information operations. What are information operations? It means collection of tactical information, that is critical information of the enemies, of the adversaries, and using this information to spread a propaganda or to affect the decision making capacities of the adversaries. So that is information operations. So these are the various functions that the private military companies, they can provide the any country where they are hired. However, please note that all these functions, they are off the conflict site, right? They are off the conflict site. They are not sending their people on the conflict site to fight for the country. They are giving all the information off site. This is no on site deployment of any people or any arms. Okay, so that is one thing you really need to keep in note. The private military companies, they are legal in certain countries, but they provide these operations, these assistance to the countries of the conflict site. They can provide services with their specialized skills and expertise, as I have already discussed. Okay, capacity building, it means improving the ability to do work. Building a person's capacity to do work is capacity building. Information operation, I'll repeat once again, it means collection of critical information of the about the adversaries, about the enemies, and then using that information either to create a propaganda, to create disinformation amongst the citizens of the adversaries, or using that information to manipulate or affect adversely the decision making power of the adversaries. On conflict site and off conflict site, it means that there is a war going on between country A and B. So this is the conflict site. This is the place where they are actually fighting. This is the border region. So this is the conflict site. So these military companies, they can provide support of the conflict site, away from the conflict site. They cannot send their people, deploy their people on the conflict site to support any particular site. Okay, cool. So let us talk about the emergence of these private military companies. Now their use dates back to many centuries. In the Middle Ages, many kings, they used to employ certain private people to fight their battles apart from their official military, right? Even if you have seen certain shows on the TV with regards to these centuries, you must have seen that there were many hired mercenaries, hired assassins that were not included in the official military of that agency. So they can be used, they were used both in the military operations as well as the security operations. In the modern sense, their role, their growth was mainly during the Cold War era. Because what happened is that during this era, the whole definition of conflicts, it started changing. There was more and more secrecy in operations, more and more technological development, right? So that is why, because of that, many countries, they started employing private people or private companies to do their dirty work. Example, the CIA of America, it is known to have hired a private military company to work for it in the 1960s in Laos. Apart from that, South Africa, it is known to have used private military companies during the apartheid era. After 1990s, once the Cold War ended, there were a lot of conflicts going on. The 1990s, they were a very turbulent time. A lot of conflicts were ongoing in the world, specifically in the Middle East and the Eastern European region. So because of that, this became more and more widespread. In many conflicts, like conflict in Afghanistan, like in Iran, in Iraq, there were use of these private military companies. There was also emergence of new types of security threats. These security threats like terrorism. See, terrorism was there since a very long time. But during the 1990s, the frequency of terrorist attacks, it increased exponentially. So there was increase in terrorism. With the development of technology, there was also increase in organized crimes. And to tackle them, many countries, they started employing private military companies. So what are the concerns when it comes to use of the private military companies? Now someone has said that privatization of military, it might reduce the expenditure of the state, right? And it might free up money for other developmental activities. But please see what is the problem over here. See, they are most cost effective compared to the traditional militaries. So the government, they do not have to pay salaries, they do not have to pay pensions, they do not have to work on getting better arms and ammunition and so on, right? They'll just pay a private company and that will handle the entire operation. However, because they're cost effective, there can be an increase in unnecessary use of these private military companies, and that might lead to escalation of any conflict between two countries. Moreover, there will be a benefit for any country that can purchase more and more private military companies from the other countries as well. Also, another very important problem is that they do not have to follow the same rules and regulations as the traditional militaries. The traditional militaries, because the countries, they are a part of Human Rights Convention, Vienna Convention, so that is why their militaries, they are also bound by those international conventions. However, these private militaries, they are not bound by any of those conventions, so they can work in whatever way they can. There is no accountability. There is no accountability. No one can be held accountable as such. Also, they are not exactly state actors, right? They are somewhere between legitimate military action that is undertaken by any country and completely illegal activities like those undertaken by terrorists. So they fall in an extreme gray area. So again, there is a difficulty to affix any kind of accountability to these agencies. Moreover, the International Convention against the recruitment, use, financing, and training of mercenaries, it prohibits any kind of state from recruiting, using, financing, and training mercenaries for in the conflict regions. So the state, they cannot sponsor any kind of recruitment, use, training, or financing of the mercenaries. Okay, so mercenaries, they are individuals that will fight for you in return of money. Private military companies, ideally, they are what? They are providing off-site support to your military. You cannot deploy them on the conflict site. You cannot finance any kind of their training, recruitment, or use at the conflict region. It is completely illegal according to the international conventions. Also, more and more use of the mercenaries and the private military companies in the conflict zones will also restrict our ability to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal 16, which is all about peace and security. It will also affect our achievement of SDG 17, that is global partnership. Okay. See, according to the international convention, these are illegal on the conflict sites. Their use is illegal on the conflict sites. Any kind of private military company, they cannot go on the border and fight your wars for you. Only your military can fight your wars for you. Okay? Mercenaries is any person who will fight for you in return for money. So that is mercenary. So I hope your doubts are clarified. Okay. So now when we talk about the conflict in Sudan and the conflict in Ukraine, a very important private military company known as the Wagner Group, it comes into scene. So what is Wagner Group? Now this is a company which is registered in the country of Argentina. However, it has its regional offices in Hong Kong as well as in St. Petersburg. Now, if you all know, St. Petersburg is where? In Russia. In fact, in 2022, the Wagner Group, it also opened a headquarter and a technology office in St. Petersburg. Okay, so it is a security providing agency registered in Argentina with very close links with Russia. In fact, the owner of this company, Yevgeny Prigozhin, okay, so this person, he is considered to be a very close ally of Vladimir Putin. So this is a security agency, so no one can say that it's a Russian agency. It is registered in Argentina. However, this particular company, it is very much active in many African nations. Mostly these African nations are those which have an authoritarian regime. So they support the authoritarian of the country, the dictator of the country, keep their power. So what are the major countries where they are present in a military capacity? We have Libya, we have Mali, Sudan, Central African Republic, and Mozambique. So in these areas, they are present in military format. They are actively helping the regimes stay in power. In many other African countries, like in Kenya, in Madagascar, in Cameroon and Burkina Faso, they are present in economic capacity. They are helping in exploitation of natural resources. So they are involved in that. So end game of this Wagner Group is to gain more and more economic advantage by exploitation of the natural resources and increase their power in the region. Now, it has been seen by many intelligence agencies that this Wagner Group, it also helped Russia in many of its conquests. 2014 Crimean War, where Russia it finally captured the Crimean Peninsula, which was a part of Ukraine. This Wagner Group had a very big role to play. Russia has also been known to use Wagner Group's facilities in the country of Syria. In fact, currently in Ukraine war as well, many experts say that Wagner Group is still active. Okay, so that is about Wagner Group. When it comes to India, do we have private military companies? Are they allowed? No. In India, the law does not allow any private military companies. So if you think about any guerrilla group or anything, they are completely illegal in India. So they might be present, but they are illegal in India. Okay. Someone told about Salwa Judum. Salwa Judum was also declared as unconstitutional in India. Okay. So that is about the Wagner Group and the private military companies. So let us take a look at this question. 10 marks, 250 words. And yes, this topic will come under international relations. So the question is, what are private military companies? What challenges do they pose with regards to global peace and security? In the introduction, you can just define the PMCs with example. In example, you can give the example of the Wagner Group itself. Then in the body part, briefly, you can talk about their emergence, how their emergence was extensively exponential after the Cold War ended. Then what can be their uses? What are their legal uses? However, what can be the consequences, especially when they are used on the conflict sites? Okay. So you can enlist the various challenges that can be posed by their use on the conflict sites. It is completely illegal according to the international law. Please note that. In the conclusion, you can mention an increase in the use of these private military companies or private militia in conflicts can jeopardize, endanger our efforts to fulfill our sustainable development goals, both the goal 16 as well as 17. Though the private sector involvement in security can help bring in innovations in the sector, it needs to be ensured that their contributions, they remain off field of the conflict site. So with that, you can end your question. You are giving a gist of why they can be dangerous and they can be useful, but they need to stay off the conflict sites. Jeopardize, it means endanger. Now the third topic is from Yojana. So this session is 3 out of 5 of the topics are women related. Okay. So women entrepreneurship in MSME sector. Okay, I'll tell you one thing. Use of mercenaries, it is illegal. Okay, it is illegal according to international law on the conflict site. Okay. Next, Wagner Group, it is a private military company registered in Argentina with very close relations with Kremlin. Okay, so this group, it is giving its services in many authoritarian regimes of Africa like Mali, Libya, Sudan, Central African Republic, and Mozambique. They are helping the dictators to retain their power. Apart from that, they also are involved in economic exploitation of the natural resources in certain other African countries. Now, according to data with the intelligence agencies, it has been found that Russia has extensively used the Wagner Group services in the 2014 Crimean Peninsula capture. They also use the group in the Syrian war. They have also used the group during the ongoing Ukraine crisis. Okay. Now, MSME is micro, small, and medium enterprises. The practice question for 15 marks, 250 words is, what do you understand by labor participation rate? Giving a brief account of women labor participation rate in India, elaborate the various steps taken by the government to improve it, with special focus on the MSME sector. Okay. So first, what is the background? Now, according to a report by the Registrar General of India, the work participation or the labor participation rate for women in India, it is just at 25%. Now, what is this rate? It is the proportion of population more than equal to 15 years of age who are actively involved in the economy of the country, who are actively working. Okay. So, according to this report, only 25% of women in India in the working age, they are participating in the labor of the country. Now, according to a study by ILO, the labor rate in India, it is on a, for women, it is on a decline. It used to be 34.1% in 1999-2000. In 2011-12, it reduced to about 27%, and now it is only at 25%. Now, what is the reason given behind this reduction in labor participation rate of women in India? First is lack of safe and quality childcare support. Childcare support does not just include the maternity leaves or paid leaves, it also includes availability of crèches, availability of proper workforce in the crèches, proper infrastructure for these crèches where the women, they can leave their children and go to work. There is also a lack of infrastructural facilities for women at the workplaces. ILO is International Labour Organization. Okay, so there is a lack of infrastructure facilities as well for women at the workplaces, like lack of toilets, lack of proper drinking water, lack of transportation, and so on. So that is why women, they are dropping out of their workplaces as well. There was a report of expert committee on micro, small and medium enterprises, which was directed by Reserve Bank of India to be published. Now, according to this report, the biggest problem that is being seen by the MSME sector in general is in unavailability of credit. Then there is another report by International Finance Corporation in 2023, and it built upon this report. So that is why I've mentioned both of these reports. So what did this report say? It said that the women entrepreneurship Women entrepreneurship, it is facing a setback in MSME sector. The biggest reason for that is lack of availability or lack of access to credit, or finance. Now, according to a study by McKinsey, if India is able to increase the participation of women in its workforce by just 10 percent points, 10% point is 0.1%. Even if we increase it by 0.1%, we could add 770 billion to our GDP by 2025. So this is a very important goal for us, right? Achieving 5 trillion economy by 2025, right? So this can be a major boost. Increasing the participation of women can be a major boost for our economy. Now let us take a look at the various efforts that the government is taking to improve this particular issue, to increase the participation rate of women in the workforce. First is the Maternity Benefit Amendment Act of 2017. So according to this act, the number of maternity leaves, paid maternity leaves for women, they have been increased from 12 weeks to 26 weeks. Apart from that, any employer with more than 50 employees, they are directed to have crèche facilities, either inside their establishment or near their establishment. Okay. Apart from that, under the Factories Act 1948, the center has directed the states to permit working of women in the night shifts on the basis that adequate safety measures are undertaken. They are provided with transport and security. Crèche, if I say in Hindi, jhula ghar. Okay, so crèche is what? It is a place where you can send your children, young children who are not yet going to the school. They can stay over there while there is no one at home, while both the parents, they have gone for work. Okay. Apart from that, various training institutes and various training programs, they have been introduced to train women in various vocational things. Like we have many women industrial training institutes, women ITIs, national vocational training institutes. We also have regional vocational training institutes. So Harismita has very nicely put that crèche is nothing but a babysitting facility for the working parents. Apart from that, the Equal Remuneration Act of 1976, which has now been replaced by the Code on Wages of 2019, and this was notified in July 2022. Now, according to this, there cannot be any kind of discrimination on the basis of gender when it comes to wages given to the workers. Equal pay, equal work. So that was also undertaken by the government of India to improve, to increase the number of women in the workforce. See, lack of credit means, just someone has a doubt, what is lack of credit? Lack of credit is lack of availability of finance for your business. You need to invest some money in your business, right? So that is the credit, the loan that you get You use that loan or that credit to invest in your business, and once your business starts running successfully, you keep paying back that particular loan. So lack of access to credit or loans mean that no one is willing to provide them with the money for their business. So let us take a look at MSMEs, the particular MSME sector and women. Now, there are two things that you need to take a look at first. One is the Udyam portal. Now, Udyam portal, it was inaugurated in July 2020, and this is the only official portal for registration of MSMEs in the country. Then there is Udyam Sakhi portal. This portal was started in the year 2018 to provide information related to financial policies, processes to the women entrepreneurs, both existing and prospective, so that they can have complete information regarding where can they get credit for their businesses, what are the various policies and programs that have been implemented by the Ministry of MSME for their benefit. Okay, so that is Udyam Sakhi portal. It is different than Udyam portal. Okay, so do not get confused in this. Okay, these are two different things. They can ask you even in your prelims. Okay, so when it comes to Udyam portal and the women entrepreneurs or the women involvement in MSMEs, it has been found that 18.67% of the total MSMEs that have been registered on the Udyam registration portal in the last not 3, say 2.5, because it has been only 2.5 years since the Udyam portal came into being. They are owned by women. So 18.67% of the total MSMEs in the past 3 years that have started their functioning, that have started their operations, are women owned. 23.59% of the employees of the MSMEs that have been registered in this portal, they are women. Okay, so this is some statistics that you can keep in mind to give examples. Okay, that almost 20% of the MSMEs in the past 3 years that have started operations, they are women owned. Now, what are the various initiatives by the Ministry of MSME for women entrepreneurs, for the women who want to start their own medium, small or micro enterprises? First is that the public procurement policy for micro and small entrepreneur order of 2012, it was amended in the year 2018. And according to this amendment, 3% of the total procurement that is done by any central ministry or department or any central PSU, it needs to be done from any micro or small enterprise. Please note, we are not including medium enterprise here. Micro or small enterprise that is owned by women, women-led or women entrepreneurs, micro or small enterprises. They also started a national scheduled caste, scheduled tribe hub. Now, this hub was to increase the inclusivity when it comes to ownership of MSMEs. So, under this hub, since the year 2016-17 when it started, more than 12,000 women, they have been trained under this program. Apart from that, credit support is provided to the women entrepreneurs under the Pradhan Mantri or Prime Minister's Employment Generation program. It has been there since 2008, and since then both the male and the female entrepreneurs, they are being provided with credit support under this program. Apart from that, there is another scheme known as credit guarantee scheme for micro and small enterprises. Now, under the scheme, various commissions or concessions, various concessions are provided to women entrepreneurs. There is a 10% reduction in the credit guarantee scheme. Sorry, in the credit guarantee fee that is charged under this program. Also, up to 80% of their credit, it will be covered under this program, compared to normally 75% credit only is covered under this program. Which means that if the woman has taken a loan of 100 rupees, this particular program, this scheme, it will ensure that they will pay back at least 80 rupees of this credit in case the woman is not able to pay it back. Also, the fee they will charge from the women, if generally they are charging 10 rupees, the woman will be charged only with 9 rupees of the fee. Okay, so there have been concessions under this scheme as well. Okay, someone has asked only 3% procurement. At least this is kind of a reservation that at least 3% of the procurement that they do, it should be done by women-led MSEs. Udyam portal is only for registration of MSMEs. Udyam Sakhi portal, it is for providing information to women entrepreneurs regarding the policies, programs, and credit facilities provided by the Ministry of MSME. Okay, so we'll move forward now. What are the other initiatives? Here we talked about the initiatives by the Ministry of MSME. Also, someone has asked, procurement means what? Procurement of any goods or any kind of services. Even if they want to, buy mats for their offices, they want to buy chairs for their offices, or any kind of service like cleaning services, then that is done through government e-marketplace, right? So under this procurement policy, it has been said that any kind of service or good that you are procuring, at least 3% of it, it should be done by any enterprise that is owned by women, micro or small. So now we'll take a look at other initiatives for women entrepreneurs, initiatives apart from those taken by the Ministry of MSME. We'll take a look at the efforts undertaken by the KVIC, Khadi and Village Industries Commission. Under the Khadi and Village Industry Commission, there is something called a Khadi program that is undertaken to promote the artisans who work on Khadi products. Okay. So under this program, 4.97 lakh artisans are employed, out of which 3.99 lakh are women artisans. So 80% of the artisans under the Khadi program, they are women. There is also facility of providing various skill development training programs to women under the KVIC. What kind of skill development? Beekeeping, soap making, candle making, tailoring, baking. So there are a variety of skill development training programs that are provided by the KVIC to women so that they can start their own enterprises or they can get absorbed in an already started enterprise. Then the Coir Board. In the coastal states of India, there is a Coir Board. Now, Coir Board, it also undertakes various training programs to help women improve the quality of the products that can be made out of coir, like mats, like ropes, like any home decor item, right? So the Coir Board, it undertakes training programs to help women improve the quality of their coir products. Then we have a cluster development program under the Sphurti scheme. The Sphurti scheme is scheme of fund for regeneration of traditional industries. So under the Sphurti schemes, various clusters, they are chosen, and there is scheme to develop these clusters by providing them with credit, by providing them with training. Now under this program, it has been found out that out of 400 odd clusters that have been chosen under this program, 498 clusters, 86 of them, they are 100% women owned, and even the employees are women. So it has been seen under the Sphurti scheme that many of the clusters chosen, they are 100% led by women. The rest of the clusters also, they have a quite a high representation of women members as well. Okay, so cluster is nothing. For example, there is a village which is very famous for leather puppets. Okay, so many people, they create leather puppets over there. So this is a cluster that develops leather puppets, and this entire unit, this entire village will be recognized as a cluster, and their development will be done under the Sphurti scheme. Okay. So now let us take a look at the question. What do you understand by labor participation rate? Giving a brief account of women labor participation rate in India, elaborate the steps taken by the government to improve it with a special focus on the MSME sector. So we have covered all of these topics. We have covered what labor participation rate is. What is the status of labor participation rate in India? It has been decreasing according to an ILO report and according to a report of Registrar General. We know the reasons why this is dropping. We also know the steps in general that the government is undertaken and the steps that the Ministry of MSME and other agencies are taking to increase the involvement of women in the MSME sector of India. Okay. So in the introduction, you just need to define the labor participation rate. In any answer, when you want to write an introduction and you're not able to think of a very fancy statement to write, you can just start by defining the particular thing that has been asked in the question. Okay. So in the introduction, you will define the labor participation rate. In the body part, first you briefly need to tell how the labor participation rate is declining in India. Then what are the steps taken by the government in general? Okay, like maternity benefit, allowing night shifts, code on wages, and so on. Then you need to focus on the specific steps taken in the MSME sector, both by the Ministry of MSME. Now, when we talk about the steps taken by Ministry of MSME, do not forget to mention the Udyam Sakhi portal as well. Then you can also take a look at the various initiatives by KVIC, by Coir Board, under the Sphurti program, and so on. Then in the conclusion, you can state that McKinsey report that we talked about, how the labor participation rate, how increasing women labor participation rate is important for us, not just to become a $5 trillion economy by 2025, but also to fulfill our sustainable development goals. Okay. So with that, we come to an end to this particular topic. Okay. So word limit, I'll tell you. This is 15 marker with 250 words. Udyam Sakhi portal, it is just a portal of the Ministry of MSME where they provide all kinds of information regarding their credit financing schemes, their policies and programs for the women entrepreneurs, both aspiring and existing ones. Okay, so that is Udyam Sakhi portal. Udyam portal, on the other hand, is a portal only for registration of the MSMEs. Now we take a look at the next topic, that is POSH Act. The question is, unless the provisions provided under the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act of 2013 for the benefit of the women employees, list the problems being faced by the sports sector in India when it comes to protection of women athletes against sexual harassment. Now, all of you must be aware that right now there is an intense protest going on by the wrestlers against sexual harassment. Now because of that protest, there was a committee, a panel that was established by the government of India that was headed by Mary Kom. Now this panel found out that many of the sport federations, they do not comply with the requirements of this particular act, also known as POSH Act. So what is the legal timeline of this particular act? So before the Vishakha guidelines, I hope most of you must be aware of the Vishakha guidelines. If not, we'll go to that. Before 1997, we only had various provisions in the Indian Penal Code. We had section 354, which was about outraging the modesty of a woman. POSH, POSH means prevention of sexual harassment. So that act, Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act of 2013, is also known as the POSH Act. So before everything, we only had two sections in the Indian Penal Code. Section 354, which was about outraging the modesty of a woman, and section 509, insulting the modesty of a woman. In 1995, there was a particular case. This case was Rupan Deol Bajaj versus KPS Gill. So this case of 1995, in this case, both the High Court and the Supreme Court, they raised questions about the inadequacy of laws in India with regards to sexual harassment at workplace. Then in the year 1997, in the Vishakha versus State of Rajasthan case, the Supreme Court, they gave the Vishakha guidelines. These Vishakha guidelines, they directed the various states and the employers regarding the various provisions that they need to undertake in order to protect the women at the workplaces. Now, these guidelines that were issued by the Supreme Court, they drew inspiration from international conventions that India was already a part of. First was Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, also known as CEDAW. Now, from this, we took aspects of equality of women in workplace, gender specific violence, and unwelcomed sexually determined behavior. Then there was an international Convention on Discrimination, Employment and Occupation Convention of the ILO. Now, India ratified this in the year 1960. And after the ratification, it became a responsibility of India or an obligation of India to prohibit and prevent any kind of gender-based discrimination at work. Okay, so these were the two conventions that were inspiration behind the Vishakha guidelines. Vishakha guidelines, they defined what sexual harassment means and what all provisions they need to be adopted by the states and by the employers to prevent any kind of such harassment, to prevent any kind of gender-based discrimination against the women. After this, there was a case, Apparel Export Promotion Council versus A.K. Chopra case of 1999. Now, in this case, the Supreme Court, they increased the ambit or the scope of what can be called as sexual harassment. They said that sexual harassment is not any kind, not just physical touch of any kind of sexual nature, but it also includes any unwelcome act. Then came the Medha Kotwal Lele and others case versus Union of India and others. This case was 2013, just before we enacted the POSH law. Under this case, the Supreme Court directed all the states to follow the Vishakha guidelines. And in case these guidelines were not adequately being followed, then the aggrieved person, they can directly move to the High Court. They do not have to come through the lower judiciary. They can directly move to the High Court of the state. Okay. So after that, the government of India, specially inspired by the Nirbhaya case of 2012, they introduced the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act of 2013, also known as the POSH Act, Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act. Now we'll take a look at the various provisions of the POSH Act of 2013. First of all, it defines what sexual harassment means. The section 2N, it defines sexual harassment as any unwelcome, sexually determined behavior. They have listed down what kinds of behavior can be considered as sexual harassment. It also defines a workplace. It defines that any place, any employer that is employing, I move forward. First, what is workplace? So it defines workplace as any place where a person has to go for their employment purposes, be it your office or be it any tour that you have to go to. It also includes any kind of transportation that is provided to the employee for going to and fro their workplace. Then every employer, they should display the details regarding the safeguards that they provide with respect to the POSH Act for the female employees. Now, many of you female employees, if you are working, you must have received a POSH training. In fact, all of you who are working, you must have received a POSH training when you started your work, because it has been made mandatory for the employees. Also, now here comes a very important part. Every employee must establish an internal complaints committee. Okay, so many of you are still wondering why are we studying about the POSH Act, how it is related to wrestlers movement. See, wrestlers movement, it is directly against sexual harassment. Okay, so in the upcoming slides, I'll clarify what is the relation between the wrestlers agitation and the POSH Act. Okay, so stay patient, try to hear what we are talking about right now. So every employee, they must establish an internal complaints committee. So internal complaints committee, it needs to be established. And the composition of this, it is given in section 4 of this act. So what is the composition of the internal complaints committee? It needs to be headed by a woman employee who is a part of the senior management. Also, more than equal to 50% of the members, they need to be women. So minimum 4 members who are employees of that particular company, they need to be a member of ICC, and apart from that, there needs to be at least one external member. Now, who will be this external member? It can be any doctor, any lawyer, or any person working in an NGO that specializes in women issues, that is working for the cause of women. So that person needs to be the external member. Now, external member ensures that there is an impartial proceeding when it comes to this investigation of any complaint. Now, in case any employer is not creating this internal complaints committee, then there are certain fines that have been discussed in this act that can be imposed on this particular employer in case of non-compliance. NGO is non-governmental organization. I'll repeat the composition part once again. Listen very carefully. It needs to be headed by a woman employee who must be a part of the senior management. More than equal to 50% of the rest of the members, they need to be women. One external member needs to be added who must be at least a doctor, who must be either a doctor or lawyer or a person working for an NGO that specializes in the causes of women. Okay, so internal complaints committee, it should have a minimum of 4 members. That includes the chairperson plus 1 external member. Now, what is the procedure for filing the complaint and conducting the inquiry in this particular act? So, the incident of harassment has taken place. So, the aggrieved employee, aggrieved female employee, they need to file a written complaint. Please see, it is written complaint. It cannot be a verbal complaint with the ICC by approaching any of the members of the ICC within the time span is also specified. It should be within 3 months of the date of the incident. Then the internal complaint committee, once they get the particular complaint, the first role of the internal complaint committee is to go for conciliation. And this can be done only if the aggrieved female employee agrees for the conciliation. Otherwise, they will start their inquiry. And the complaint, it needs to be inquired upon within 90 days of receiving the complaint. Then they'll conduct the inquiry and create a report of the inquiry. In the report of the inquiry, they have three options. One, action for misconduct against the person, against the perpetrator, or they cannot take any action. They can also feel that no action is required in this case. Or in case there was a false complaint or false evidence that was submitted to the internal complaints committee, then in that case they can suggest for any punishment to the female employee. So the inquiry report, it needs to be submitted within 10 days of the date of completion of inquiry. And during this inquiry, the internal complaints committee has all the powers of a civil court to ease them in conduction of the investigation. Then we talked about the internal complaints committee. There is also another provision known as local complaints committee. Now these committees, they are established for those employees who are working with employers with less than 10 employees. Because if you have more than 10 employees, it becomes necessary under the law to have an internal complaints committee. If you have less than 10 employees, it is not necessary. So where will the women who are aggrieved in this case go? They'll go to the local complaints committee. Also, the unorganized sector women can approach this. And in case the complaint needs to be filed against the employer, even with more than 10 employees, the companies which already have an internal complaints committee, in case the complaint has to be filed against the employer, the entire company itself, then again the women can go to the local complaints committee. ICC is Internal Complaints Committee. Okay, so local complaints committee, they'll receive complaints from these three kinds of women. Now the state, it needs to, under the act, it needs to direct the district officer for formation of this particular committee. Now please look at the composition of this committee. So first will be the chairperson. Now the chairperson needs to be an eminent woman who is working or is committed to the field of cause of women. Who is working in a field or who has dedicated her work towards causes of women. Okay, so this needs to be an eminent woman working in this regard. Next we have a member who is a working woman, either in block, taluka, tehsil, or ward, or municipality. Okay, so this is a government employee who is working in either at block, taluka, tehsil level, or ward or municipality level. Block, taluka, tehsil in case of rural areas, municipality or ward in case of urban areas. Apart from that, the third type of members include two members who are working in NGOs which are committed to the cause of women, or any person who is familiar with the issues related to women. Then there will be a de facto member. And this is the officer who is dealing with social welfare or welfare of women and child development in the district. Okay, so this will be the composition of this particular committee, the local complaints committee. Apart from that, the district officer, they can appoint a person as a nodal officer at one nodal officer at each level of block, tehsil, taluka, ward and municipality, and this nodal officer will have the duty that any complaint can be submitted to this nodal officer, and they will have to present this particular complaint to the local complaints committee within 7 days. De facto means automatically, without a separate appointment, right? Like the vice president of India is the de facto chairperson of the Rajya Sabha. Similarly, this person, the officer dealing with social welfare or welfare of women and child development in the district, will be a de facto member of the local complaints committee. You don't need to take you don't need to spend a lot of time in remembering the composition. I'm just telling you so that you do not feel that anything has been missed. Okay, now both the ICC, internal complaints committee, and the local complaints committee, they need to file annual reports to the district officer and they to the company. Now, what in case of a false complaint? What will happen if a false complaint has been filed by a person? Now, in this case, the Internal Complaints Committee, according to the Section 14 of the POSH Act, they can suggest any kind of action or punishment against the female employee who has filed the false complaint according to the service rules, whatever the service rules talk about. However, please note one thing that is very important, is that it cannot be called a false complaint only on the basis that the woman is not able to substantiate the complaint or give proper proof of the complaint. Okay, only if it is specifically mentioned, there is a specific proof that this is a false complaint, then only it can be declared as a false complaint. Only if the person is not able to generate proper proof against the perpetrator, in that case it cannot be called a false complaint. Also, please note that the complaints, they can be filed only by the female employees. Now, what are the problems that have been seen in the sports federation? Now, the panel headed by Mary Kom, they found out a lot of irregularities in the sports federations of India. There are total 56 sports federations that have been recognized in the country. In this report, we are talking about 30 of these sport federations. They include the federations of the sports in which we took part during the 2018 Asian Games or 2021 Tokyo Games, Tokyo Olympics, or the 2022 Commonwealth Games. Okay, so it has been found out that even though there has been an exponential increase in the number of women athletes, according to the Khelo India Games, according to them, there has been a 161% increase in women athletes in India. Despite that, only 16 out of the 30 sport federations Despite that, 16 out of 30 sport federations, they do not comply with the POSH Act. 4 of them, they do not have the minimum number of members. What is the minimum number of members? 4 internal, 1 external, that are needed in the internal complaints committee. Also, 6 of these 16 federations, they do not have any external members. Now, why have I mentioned this particular statement? Is that the sports federation, you'll say that according to the law, only the employers need to have the internal complaints committee. Now, sports federations, they are societies or trust or companies. They are registered either as societies, as trust or companies. That makes them employers. And the POSH Act, it recognizes or it covers societies, trusts, and companies, all 3 of them. So if a sports federation is registered as any of these, it will come under the ambit of the POSH law. So if they are not following this, they are not following the POSH Act and the various provisions of it, then action can be taken against them. Now we'll come to the question. 10 marks, 150 words. Unless the provisions provided under the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act 2013 for the benefit of women employees. List the problems being faced by the sports sector in India when it comes to protection of women athletes against sexual harassment. In the introduction part, you can mention that with the increased participation of women in the labor share of India, it becomes important to provide them protection against any kind of sexual harassment in order to provide them a safe environment to work in, to prevent any kind of gender-based discrimination at the workplace. In the body part, first you can give a basic timeline of how the act developed, how we started with Vishakha guidelines, and then we came to the POSH Act. Then what are the major provisions? Creation of the ICC, LCC, fines in case of non-compliance. Then you can also mention who all is considered as an employer and what is sexual harassment. After that, you can give the details of this report regarding the sport federations of India. In the conclusion, you can mention that our female athletes, they are earning laurels at the international level. It is the need of the hour that the sports federations, they start providing with a safe space to hone their skills, to improve their abilities by implementing the provisions of the POSH Act of 2013. So with that, you can end your answer. Now we'll come to the last topic, that is malaria causes and the latest developments. So here is the practice question. "15 marks, 250 words. India has one of the highest disease burden when it comes to malaria. However, we have been constantly trying to control the spread of this disease. Elaborate. You have to elaborate on this point. Also state the contemporary challenges that India need to tackle in order to eliminate malaria by 2030. Now, why have we taken this? Why was this in news? 25th April, it was the World Malaria Day. Also, during this time only, it was declared that malaria is set to become a notifiable disease all across the country. Notifiable disease means that any lab, any clinic, any hospital that gets a case of malaria, they need to report that case to the government. So right now, already 33 states and union territories have declared this disease as a notifiable disease. The 3 remaining states and union territories, that is Bihar, Meghalaya and Andaman and Nicobar, they are in the process to make it a notifiable disease. Once these 3 units, they also do it, it will become a notifiable disease all across the country. So sorry, the mic is having some problems. Okay. It is 33 states and union territories. We have 36 in total, states plus union territories, right? Okay. So about malaria. So you must have read about malaria extensively in either sciences, technology, or any other subject. So we'll go through this very quickly. So malaria, it is a mosquito-borne disease. It is caused by protozoa. Now there is a very big confusion. What is the microorganism that causes malaria? Many students, they get confused whether it's a bacteria, virus, fungi. It is a protozoa that is causing malaria. Now there is a type of protozoa known as Plasmodium. Now 5 different kinds of Plasmodium parasites, 5 different species of this Plasmodium parasite, which is a protozoa, can cause this disease. Out of these 5 types, 5 species, 2 are very dangerous. 2 types of malarias are very dangerous. That is that caused by Plasmodium falciparum and Plasmodium vivax. So malaria caused by them, it is the most dangerous kind of malaria. So vector-borne is any disease that requires a carrier to spread the disease from one place to another, because mosquito are biting a patient and then biting someone else and spreading the disease, right? So this is a vector-borne disease. Notifiable disease, I'll repeat in a quickly, that if a disease is notifiable, then any lab, any clinic, any hospital that gets a case of that particular disease, they need to let the state government know about that. Now, what is the vector in this disease? We have the female Anopheles mosquito. Now, what happens is this mosquito, which has bitten an infected person, when it bites a non-infected person, what happens? The particular parasite, it enters our body, it goes to our liver, and in the liver cells, it starts multiplying. It starts multiplying over there, and then it enters our bloodstream. So please note, first it goes to the liver, where it does its first multiplication, then it enters our bloodstream, and that is how finally we get infected. Now it has entered our bloodstreams, our RBCs, red blood cells, they have been infected. Now if a mosquito will bite us and then they'll bite someone else, then the disease will get transferred to that person as well. So what is the global and regional status of malaria? According to the World Malaria Report 2022, there has been a modest increase. This is 2020. There has been a modest increase in cases in the year 2021 compared to 2020. Okay, so cases have increased. However, please note that compared to the percentage of increase of cases between 2019 and 20, this rate of increase has reduced. So this World Malaria Report, it divides the world into 5 regions. Out of that, one region is Southeast Asia, and India is a part of that particular region according to this report. So the 9 endemic countries of Southeast Asian region, according to this report of 2022, they are contributing to 2% of the global burden of malaria. So 2% of the total cases of malaria, they are in this particular region. Now in June 2021, this is another very important fact. that in June 2021, China, it became the biggest and the most populous country of the world to have eliminated malaria. Now, globally, this disease, it has been eliminated across 42 countries, according to a report that was published in April 2023 by World Health Organization. Now, there is something called Asia Pacific Malaria Elimination Network. Now, this network, it was established in the year 2009. It is also known as Asia Pacific Leaders Malaria Alliance. So it was established in 2009 and India joined it in 2015. The mission of this particular alliance or network is to eliminate malaria in this region by in entire Asia Pacific region by the year 2030. Now, two of the members of this network are already malaria free. What are these two members? First is Sri Lanka, which eliminated this disease in 2016. Then we have China, who eliminated this in 2021. So two members of this grouping, they have already eliminated malaria. Now, what is India's status? Now, we have read that 2% of the global burden, it is in Southeast Asian region. India belongs to this region, and 79% of the entire cases of the Southeast Asian region, they are concentrated within India. Okay, so that means that India has a very high burden when it comes to malaria cases. Between 2015 to 2022, India has seen a decline both in the number of malaria cases. The decline is huge, 85% decline compared to 2015 in the year 2020. There, we have also seen a huge decline in the number of malaria deaths by 83.36%. Now, India has a vision that we want to become malaria free by 2027 and we want to entirely eliminate the disease. Elimination means breaking the transmission cycle. Now, technically, when we say malaria free and malaria elimination, it is one and the same thing. But what do we mean by eliminate the disease? We want to get the certificate from WHO that India has eliminated the malaria as a disease. Okay, so how can we get that certificate? Only if we have been free of malaria for 3 consecutive years. So if we are free of malaria for 3 consecutive years, we become free by 2027, then we'll get the certification from WHO, World Health Organization, by 2030 that India is now malaria free. India has eliminated malaria. Okay, so that is the purpose that we want to serve. Now, what is the timeline of India's malaria elimination efforts? Now, this portion is like a story, so just sit back and try to listen. So, in the early 1900s, the only way that we know of eliminating the disease was by eliminating the larva, was by cutting short the breeding of the mosquitoes. In 1909, in a place known as Kasauli, the Central Malaria Bureau was established. It was transferred to Delhi in the year 1938 and it became the Malaria Institute of India. Right now, it is in Delhi under the Indian Council for Medical Research and it is now known as National Institute of Malaria Research. Okay. So in early 1900s, the only way we knew of reducing malaria cases was by killing the mosquitoes, by eliminating their breeding through use of larvicides to kill the larva, or to ensure that any pits they do not have water, the water is drained out of the pits, and these pits are either covered or filled with concrete or other material so that water cannot get inside it. So prior to 1940, we did not have any kind of national malaria control program. In 1945, after the Second World War, it was identified that DDT, it has very good insecticide properties. So DDT, we started using it to kill mosquitoes. So it was being sprayed along the roads, inside the hospitals, inside the houses to kill the mosquitoes. So after this, in the year 1946, because the malaria cases they were not coming down, there was a Bhore committee. Now Bhore committee, it asked for starting a dedicated national level malaria control program. Now after independence in 1947, in the year 1951, the planning commission, it supported this idea of Bhore committee for having a countrywide malaria program to control the disease. So finally, in the year 1953, there was the launch of National Malaria Control Program. National Malaria Control Program, it worked on indoor spraying of insecticides plus monitoring and surveillance of all the malaria cases and providing treatments to all the patients. It was highly successful. This was a highly successful program, and this gave us the motivation to move, not to move from the control phase to the eradication phase, to eradicate the disease from the country. So in 1958, we launched the National Malaria Eradication Program with support from the World Health Organization. So at that time, this particular program was one of the highly funded health programs in the entire world. So it had 4 phases. This program, it had 4 phases. The preparatory phase, where we were to prepare ourselves with all the equipments, all the material, the chemicals that we need to eliminate mosquitoes. Then the attack phase. Then the consolidation phase. And finally, the maintenance phase. So this was also very successful. And up to 1965, within 7 years of having this particular program, the cases were reduced considerably. India, which had a population of almost 450 million people, the number of cases in India in 1965 were just 0.1 million. So that was a very big achievement for India. However, it was seen that malaria had started increasing now in the especially the urban areas. In 1969, there was a committee known as Modhak Committee. Mudhawk Committee, which recommended for a specific program for the urban areas to eliminate malaria in those regions. So that is why in the year 1971, we started the urban malaria scheme to control the spread of this disease in 131 towns of India. Okay. So 70s saw a resurgence in the malaria cases in general in India. Now, what were the reasons of this resurgence? The slow development of health infrastructure, inadequate surveillance and monitoring of the malaria cases, logistic challenges, and also technical challenges like increase in resistance of the mosquitoes against the insecticides and increase in drug resistance amongst the plasmodium. Okay, so plasmodium, it was not getting killed with the usual drugs that we used to use. What was the usual drug? It was known as chloroquine. So in up to 1976, the malaria cases became 6.46 million. It was the highest number of cases in the post DDT era, that is since the Second World War. So that is why in the year 1977, a modified plan of operations was implemented. Now this had three-pronged strategy. One was government efforts, that is administrative efforts to reduce the disease, increase malaria research, and public participation. So that was under the modified plan of operations. So in 1984 till 1998, there was a reduction in the number of cases. However, in 1994, the cases again started increasing in certain states. So that is why certain specific targeted programs, they need to be started. So modified action plan for malaria control was implemented to target these particular states, and World Bank eventually also started assisting us in this particular project known as Enhanced Malaria Control Project. In the year 1998, the malaria program was finally renamed to the National Anti-Malaria Program to give it more gravitas. This program was eventually, in the year 2003, it was renamed as National Vector-Borne Disease Control Program. And apart from malaria, it included 5 more diseases that were Japanese encephalitis, lymphatic filariasis, dengue or dengue, chikungunya, and kala azar. Since the year 2005, this particular program, it is being implemented under the National Rural Health Mission, and now it has been subsumed under the National Health Mission. In 2005, a global fund known as Global Fund to Fight AIDS, TB, and Malaria, it started assisting India through an intensified malaria control project for specifically targeting certain states and districts which had very high number of cases. In 2006, World Bank started assisting us in this enhanced vector-borne disease control program, against targeting certain districts and states. In 2015, I told you that Asia Pacific Network we talked about earlier, India joined it in the year 2015 to eliminate malaria in the region by the year 2030. In 2016, we launched the National Framework for Malaria Elimination. Under this national framework, the states were classified in various categories. We had category 0 for the states where no new cases were found, and this category, it was for prevention of reintroduction phase. Then we had the category 1. These states we needed elimination of the disease. So this was under the elimination phase. Category 2, pre-elimination phase. And category 3, intensified control phase. So the states were divided in 4 categories depending upon the number of cases they are experiencing, and different phases were given, and they were given different phases to follow. Then in 2017, there was the launch of the National Strategic Plan for Malaria Elimination in India. This strategic plan, it focused at universal detection of the cases and providing 100% coverage of the cases where there of treatment for these cases. So 100% of the cases, all the patients need to be identified and need to be provided with the proper treatment. Not just because we want them to get better, we also do not want the mosquitoes to bite them and spread the disease further. In 2019, a high burden to high impact initiative was introduced in 4 states that had very high burden of malaria. They were West Bengal, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and Madhya Pradesh. So it was found that when the long-lasting insecticide nets were distributed in these states, there was a reduction seen in the number of cases over here. In 2019, a research network was launched, MERA India, Malaria Elimination Research Alliance. It included a consortium of national and international organizations like WHO, like various NGOs working for malaria elimination, various medical institutes, Medicine for Malaria Venture, and so on. So this was under the helm of Indian Council for Medical Research, and it aimed to increase the collaboration between various partners when it comes to increasing research in malaria. Now, what is the way forward? We understood what all policies, how they have evolved over the year. The way forward is, first we need to identify the high transmission zones and have targeted programs for them. We already have a targeted program for tribal areas known as Tribal Malaria Action Plan. Just 2 more minutes, okay? So we already have a tribal malaria action plan. We need to have such targeted action plans for hilly regions, for desert regions, and the regions which are undergoing conflicts. We also need to focus on malaria in pregnancy because that can increase the chances of fertility in both the mother as well as the child. So according to various research, India has 10 to 30% of the total global burden of these malaria in pregnancy cases. So we need to focus on them as well. There is an increase in drug resistance amongst the plasmodium, amongst the protozoa that is creating this disease. We need to focus on that. There is also an increased resistance against the insecticides for the mosquitoes. You know that all out that you use these days, it does not have any impact on the mosquitoes, right? So we need to have research on that as well. Unplanned and rapid urbanization needs to be taken care of because in the slum and squatter areas, there is lack of sanitation which can lead to growth in the numbers of mosquitoes. And apart from that, we also need to increase availability of affordable housing so that such slum and squatter settlements, they cannot be created. Then climate change is a very big challenge. According to the IPCC report, 6th assessment report, the altitude up to which malaria can reach, it is increasing. So there can be an increase in number of outbreaks in the Himalayan region. Also the latitudes in which the malaria can spread, it is also increasing due to increasing warmth, due to increasing temperatures. So that is also another big challenge specifically for the Himalayan region of the country. Now we come back to the question. India has one of the highest disease burden when it comes to malaria. However, we have been constantly trying to control the spread of this disease. Elaborate. Also state the contemporary challenges that India need to tackle in order to eliminate malaria by 2030. We have covered all of these. In the introduction, you need to give a brief about malaria and state India's disease burden. It has already been stated. Then the body part, state the major programs that have been undertaken since independence. A very beautiful table has been given in this PPT. Then what are the contemporary challenges? We have covered them: drug resistance, climate change, unplanned urbanization, and so on. Then in the conclusion, you can mention that India has shown a great progress through malaria control strategies. However, change is the only constant, and this requires India to constantly upgrade her strategies to tackle the upcoming challenges in the face of our malaria elimination efforts. So that is all about today's webinar. I hope you understood everything. We overshot again by 10 minutes. I'm so sorry for that. So yeah, so that's it. We'll wrap up now. Thank you very much and have a very good night.